Life of Pi, written by Ian Martel, is a beautiful, emotionally resonant tale of faith, friendship, and perseverance. It tells the story of Pi, a teenage boy from India who finds himself trapped in a lifeboat in the Pacific Ocean with a tiger. It is the third book by the Canadian author Ian Martel and was published in 2001. It has sold 7 million copies worldwide, won several prizes, and been translated into 41 languages. Ian Martel is the son of diplomat and spent his childhood in Costa Rica, Canada, France, and Mexico. He grew up speaking both French and English. Martel studied philosophy at Trent University in Ontario and later spent a year in India visiting religious sisters and zoos. This Spanish-born Canadian author of French-Canadian descent, best known for the Man Booker Prize-winning novel Life of Pi, an international bestseller published in more than 50 territories. Martel is also the author of the novels The High Mountains of Portugal, Beatrice and Virgil, The Facts Behind the Hersiki Racamerius, and Self. At the start of the book, we learn about Pi's childhood in Pondicherry in India. His father owns the city zoo and the family home is in the zoo. When they are not at school, Pi and his brother help their father at the zoo and he learns a lot about animals. Pi is very much interested in religion. Though he is a Hindu by birth, he is curious about Christianity and Islam and decides to believe in all three religions. When Pi is 16-year-old, his parents decide to close the zoo and move to Canada. They sell some of the animals to zoos in North America and the family travel by ship to Canada, taking the animals with them. On the way, there is a terrible storm and the ship sinks. Sadly, Pi's family and the sailors all die in the storm. But Pi lives and finds himself in a lifeboat with a hyena, zebra, and orangutan and an enormous tiger. To know what happens to him, let's move on and learn the story. The ship sinks and Pi finds himself in a lifeboat in the midst of utter chaos. He sees a Royal Bengal tiger named Richard Parker in the water near drowning and urges him to save himself. Richard Parker climbs the lifeboat and suddenly Pi realizes the danger in sharing a tiny space with a vicious animal. He throws himself into the roiling water. The narrative moves back a few moments to the point just before the sink of the Simpson. Pi is sleeping when a loud noise, perhaps an explosion, wakes him. He tries to wake Ravi, his brother, so they can go exploring together, but Ravi stays asleep. Pi passes his parents' cabin door and climbs up to the main deck where he sees that it is raining. The boat is listing considerably to one side and making awful grounding noises. Pi begins to feel afraid. He tries to run back down to the level of the ship where his family is, but the stairwell is full of water. Pi goes back to the main deck where he hears animals shirking. 3 Chinese crewmen put a life jacket on him and throw him over the side of the ship. He falls 40 feet through the air before landing on the tarpaulin, partially covering a lifeboat hanging from the ship's side. A grand zebra jumps into the lifeboat after him, smashing down onto a bench. The lifeboat falls into the water. The narrative moves forward again to the moment just after Pi jumps from the lifeboat into the water to escape from Richard Parker. A shark cuts through the water nearby, and Pi is terrified. He looks into the boat, but sees only the zebra, not the tiger. He slips back into the water, but sees another shark and quickly hoists himself up onto an oar hanging off the edge of the ship. He dangles a few feet above the water, holding on for dear life. The ship continues to sink until it disappears. There are no other survivors as far as Pi can tell. After some time passes, Pi decides that he needs to change position to prevent further soreness and help him spot other lifeboats. He climbs up onto the lifeboat's tarpaulin cover under which he believes Richard Parker is hiding. Pi is frightened, expecting the tiger to appear and attack him at any moment, but the tiger stays hidden. Pi notices that the zebra is still alive but has a severely broken back leg. A hyena appears and Pi rationalizes that Richard Parker must have drowned, for a tiger and hyena could not both be on the lifeboat at the same time. Pi realizes that the crew members must have thrown him into the lifeboat as bait for the hyena, hoping to clear the lifeboat for themselves. Pi is fearful of the hyena, but decides that the upfront aggression of a dog is preferable to the slyness and stealth of a jungle cat. An orangutan named Orange Juice, once a star animal at the Pondicherry Zoo, and the mother of 2 male orangutans float up to the lifeboat on a rat of bananas tangled up in a net. She climbs the lifeboat, seemingly in shock. Pi saves the net but loses the bananas. Pi tries to make his spot on the tarpaulin as safe as possible, throwing the net over the middle, but there is almost no barrier between him and the animals. The hyena begins to act strangely, jumping up onto a bench and looking into the water, then racing around the zebra over and over again. Finally, the hyena vomits and settles into a small space just behind the zebra, where it remains for a time. The zebra remains silent. The daylight begins to fade, and Pi contemplates the coming night with horror. In the dark, a rescue ship won't be able to spot him, and the animals might attack him. Night falls. It is cloudy, and there is no moon, so the darkness is complete. Pi hears snarl coming from the hyena and barks from the zebra, as well as wet mouth sounds. He hears sound from under the boat and notes that the animals in the water are also battling for life. After that first full night in the lifeboat, the sun rises, and Pi's thoughts turn to rescue and seeing his family again. But when he looks into the lifeboat, he finds the hyena has bitten off the zebra's broken leg and is eating it, and the orange juice remains unhurt by the hyena. At that time, a sea turtle bumps against the hull of the boat. Pi tells it to go find help, and the turtle slips back down into the sea. Pi notices that the water around the boat is full of mako sharks and other fish. Suddenly, the hyena attacks the zebra, eating it alive from the inside. Orange Juice roars in protest, and the hyena howls back. Some blood falls over the side of the boat, and sharks begin to circle and bump the hull. Pi fears that they will break the boat, causing it to sink. But soon, the standoff between the hyena and orangutan ends, and the shark swims away. The zebra finally dies later the next day. Afterwards, the hyena attacks the orange juice and kills it too. Pi cries and goes to the edge of the tarpaulin, ready to throw himself to the hyena, when he sees Richard Parker's head under the bench. He goes back to the bow and falls into a frantic sleep. Here, Pi tells the story of Richard Parker's capture. A panther had been killing people near Bangladesh, and a professional hunter was called in to try to capture it. Leaving a goat as bait, the hunter instead attracted 2 tigers, a mother and her cub. The hunter sedated the mother and picked up the cub, sending them both off to the Pondicherry Zoo. In the accompanying paperwork, the name of the hunter who had picked up the cub, Richard Parker, gets mixed up with the name of the cub, Thirsty. The mix-up so amuses Mr. Patel, and he decides to call the tiger cub Richard Parker. Back on the lifeboat, Pi is so certain the tiger will kill him that he actually cheers up a bit. There is nothing he can do now. Suddenly, he is overcome by thirst and explores the lifeboat looking for water. He observes the details of the boat, its benches and oarlocks, its bright orange color, its dimensions, 26 feet long and 8 feet wide. Pi discovers a locker containing emergency supplies under the end of the lifeboat under the tarpaulin where Richard Parker has his den. Carefully, he opens the locker and assesses the contents. greedily drinking some canned water and eagerly eating emergency rations. He tallies his supplies. He has 31 cartons of rations and 124 cans of water among other survival items. Pi decides that to survive with Richard Parker as a companion, he needs to build a raft to put some distance between himself and the tiger. He creates a raft using oars, a lifebuoy, and life jackets, then tethers it to the lifeboat. As he is doing so, the hyena starts whining and the Richard Parker begins to growl. Finally, the tiger kills the hyena. Richard Parker turns around and starts to approach Pi, but gets distracted by the rolling of the boat and the bounciness of the tarpaulin. Meanwhile, Pi gets enough time to escape into his raft. The raft proves seaworthy, but Pi knows he is floating just above a vast ocean with sharks all around. Rain falls, and Pi uses a rain catcher to trap fresh water for drinking. He continuously checks the knots in the ropes holding together the parts of the raft. Unable to sleep, he entertains fanciful ways of killing Richard Parker. Finally, Pi decides to wait for the tiger to run out of water and starve. The next day, he realizes the flaws in his plan. Bengal tigers can swim and drink salty water. If Richard Parker gets hungry, he will jump into the ocean and swim out to Pi. If he gets thirsty, he will drink seawater. While looking at Pi, the tiger makes an unusual noise. Pi recognizes it as the rare sound tigers use to express harmless intentions. At this moment, Pi decides to try to tame Richard Parker using a whistle. Richard Parker intensely dislikes the sound of the whistle and lies down in the bottom of the lifeboat. Pi dries off and reads the survivor manual he has found in the lifeboat locker. He realizes that he needs to fish and create a shelter from the elements. Thirsty and hungry, he decides to go back to the lifeboat. There he discovers 12 solar stills devices that transform salt water into fresh water through a process of evaporation and sets them up in the water. He then makes improvements to his raft. He carves an oar and turns it into a mast, hangs a blanket as a canopy, and adds a life vest to the floor of the raft. Then Pi enjoys a dinner of rations in the raft, and Richard Parker looks on from the lifeboat. Pi looks down at the ocean and sees that it is full of life in many forms. Pi tries to fish using a leather shoe as bait. Some hit Pi and Richard Parker, some fall into the boat, some jump over the hull and fly clear to the other side and back into the water. Richard Parker eats his fill, and Pi sets out to kill one himself. A lifelong vegetarian and pacifist, Pi hesitates and then cries when he finally breaks the neck of the fish with his hands. Later, Pi manages to land 3-foot-long Dorado, which he kills and feeds to Richard Parker. At last, he learns the necessity of killing his food to stay alive. Pi drinks heartily from one of the 12 stills. He empties the rest into a bucket for Richard Parker. Pi, looking back at his ordeal, says he spent 227 days as a castaway at sea. Back on the raft and lifeboat, Pi busies himself with tasks. His daily schedule consists of chores and activities. He feeds himself and Richard Parker, keeps the vessels clean and functioning smoothly, and stimulates his mind. Pi says he survived only because he managed to forget the very notion of time. Pi's clothes disintegrate over time, and the near constant wetness causes sea boils. He learns to train a net in the water and catches more fish than he can eat. He also learns to catch the turtle and drinks its blood, which the survival manual recommends as the nutritious and salt-free thirst quencher. Pi presents a training manual for taming a wild creature in the lifeboat at sea. He uses a turtle shell for a shield. Finally, Pi is able to send Richard Parker back into the bottom of the boat by blowing on the whistle and rocking the boat to induce nausea in the tiger. Above all, he learns to blow the whistle angrily to demonstrate dominance. Pi keeps a diary, writing down mostly practical observations, and carries out the religious rituals adapted to his unique situation. He also cleans up after Richard Parker as part of the training exercise. One day, a terrible storm rolls in and sends Pi scrambling into the lifeboat, where he lies flat on a bench at the end farthest from Richard Parker. He closes the tarpaulin over them both. The storm rages for day and night, during which time the boat climbs up waves that resemble mountains. When the storm subsides, Pi realizes that the raft is gone. Only a couple oars and a life jacket remain. His stores of water are unharmed, but the lifeboat itself has sustained some damage. He starts mending the torn tarpaulin and bailing out water. Pi sees several seabirds. He kills a masked booby, skins it, and eats its edible parts. One day, a lightning storm puts Pi in a state of exaltation. Richard Parker cowers in fear. Another day, a tanker appears on the horizon, and Pi is sure they will be saved. Instead, the tanker, oblivious to the small lifeboat, nearly ran them over. From the thrash in the lifeboat, Pi takes a bottle. He seals a message in it and throws it back into the ocean. Pi's condition continues to deteriorate, as does Richard Parker's. Pi is convinced he is near death. His pen runs out of ink, and he can no longer write in his diary. He begins sleeping many hours a day, slipping into a state of semi-consciousness. The lifeboat comes across a low island covered entirely with algae. Pi and Richard Parker stops for a time, eating the vegetation, drinking the fresh water, and nursing themselves back to the health. The island is full of meerkats, small ferret-like creatures, and Pi sees that the island's fresh ponds are full of dead fish. A storm hits again, while Pi and Richard Parker are ashore, and the island weathers it beautifully, absorbing the ocean's ferocious waves. Pi discovers a tree that bears fruit. He decides that the island is carnivorous. He stocks the lifeboat with dead fish and meerkats, and eats and drinks his fill of algae and fresh water. Then he waits for Richard Parker to board the lifeboat and pushes off into the sea. The lifeboat washes ashore on a Mexican beach. Pi sprawls in the sand, and Richard Parker bounds away into the jungle. Pi weeps at the loss of his comrade, saddened that he was not able to say goodbye. Villagers rescue Pi and take him to the hospital, where they can clean him up and feed him. He cannot understand their language, but realizes he is finally saved. The Japanese ministry directs two officials to speak with Pi, the lone survivor of the Japanese Sup, to try to better understand why the ship sank. Pi says he had a horrible trip and narrates the whole incident. After listening everything, they tell Pi that they don't believe his story. They also say that they really enjoyed the story, but they really want to know what had happened to the ship. They ask more technical questions, but Pi can tell them nothing to help solve the mystery of the Simpsons sinking. In the report, which years later is sent, it is written that Pi's story of survival at sea with an adult Bengal tiger is astounding and unique. Undoubtedly, Life of Pi is a story of perseverance and a story of not giving up even in the hardest of conditions. Pi did not give up hope, and he kept moving. Whether it is the Black Sea or the dark clouds or the ominous waves or the hungry man-eater as company, Pi never gave up hope of survival. And I hope that the story will undoubtedly make you reinforce your faith.